I think the zone 2 episode will land pretty nice.
I was thinking we could kind of play off of that, like use that as the jumping off point for this, because we do kind of come down hard on it. But then as you get into the art and science of coaching, you're like, well, there is a place for it. And we kind of settled on like, just don't call it zone 2, just call it easy work. We could talk a little bit about like high-low programming. I think you've posted about high-low programming, right? Or high-low training in the past.
Probably. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I talk about this stuff quite a lot because from a principle level, it's just like quite lacking. So
You mean organization of training?
yeah. And rehab too, right? Like it's
Oh, yeah.
the same idea, same principles. So, and I just think people don't quite recognize the similarities enough.
Between rehab and training.
Yeah, that's why I post so much about it. But it goes for both, right? It's just like specificity, overload, recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. We could dive into that because that's kind of like, it's an interesting concept in that people will talk about high-low training. They're like, oh, well, this is a high session, right? Like it's like plyos are a high session, right? You've got lots of ground contact. You're causing lots of central nervous system fatigue. And then your moderate sessions are like your bodybuilding sessions, your aerobic threshold sessions. And then your low sessions are like easy run. Right? However, if you take a power lifter, if you put them on that program, it's going to be the opposite. They're going to be so well adapted to doing these high sessions that they'll actually be like moderate low sessions. And especially in the volume that you would typically train a CrossFitter in, it's probably going to trend more towards the low end of that session. But you send them out for a 30 or 45-minute easy run, and it's going to be punishing. They're going to be so sore afterwards. We could even talk about like, how would we qualify and quantify the stress that we're looking at from high-low training? Like, what is it? Those are interesting topics. It would be like fatigue, soreness, RPE / like excitability. When I look at high-low training, I don't just look at recovery demand, but I look at performance demand. So the bulk of the time, if you're doing a skill session, you don't want to precede that skill session with a bunch of fatiguing work because you want to get the most out of it. So even though it's a low session for most people, you wouldn't want to do like something that's really, really fatiguing in front of it.
Yeah, it kind of defeats the purpose, right? Like if you're
like,
so fatigued, you can't perform well, then the practice isn't going to be good quality.
yeah. And then, oh yeah, we were back to zone 2. Like just call it easy work. And so what are we going to put in your easy blocks if we're talking about high-low training? What does a low training piece or training day look like?
Yeah.
It's coming frequency, intensity, time and type. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Frequency, intensity, time and type.
Do you want to do this today and then high-low another time?
I don't know.
I think there's a pretty big discussion there. They relate for sure. So
I was just thinking that high-low training is a science that needs the art lens applied to it. So if we're talking about this kind of science-based stuff,
yeah,
we get into high-low training. It's like, this is how you properly organize a week of training, but everybody responds to training in a different way. And that's what art folds into it, of knowing how your athlete is going to respond to the training so that you're not just like blanket approach.
that's a good point. It does fit nicely, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we could just nest that in there. So the science of coaching is like the information, right? What are the things that are either true or likely to be true about training, right? So it's like, okay, lifting heavy makes you stronger. So if you're trying to get somebody stronger, the intensity has to be high. So, and then frequency, right? So If you're trying to develop skills, the frequency has to be high. Time and type are the two T's in that acronym. The type is obviously the specificity, right? So the type of thing that you're doing should be the type of thing you're trying to get better at. And the time is, just another variable that you can program in there depending on what you're doing. So that's just an acronym for some of those training variables: frequency, intensity, time, and type.
And the time is like the time allocation.
Or, if it was cardio, it'd be more of a straightforward, just like how long are you going, but
Oh yeah. I guess allocation fits into
diet.
side of things. Or sorry, art side of it.
Yeah, a little bit of both, but yeah, I think this side is just like, what do we know about physiology and exercise science? And then the art is like, okay, how do we make that work for this person?
So then in your, like, just off the top of your head, what are the types of specific adaptations that you might spot and train for? So let's say we do, like, we have a new athlete that come to us and you're like, give me your benchmarks. You just get a bunch of data, right? What are the types of adaptations that you're looking at, or the types of KPIs that you're looking at that you will then apply some science towards?
Max lifts or repetition maxes. So strength, some endurance metric probably. So if they have 2K, 5K times, time trials, or even the sprint kind of performances, 50 cal for time, maybe echo bike for that just really high power output. And then skills would be like a little bit more on the art side, right? Be like, you have to observe. You might get some rep maxes for gymnastics moves as well. You can do max strict handstand push-ups, max muscle ups.
Yeah. Would you put those in with your max lifts and RMs? I suppose it depends upon, like, if it's strict handstand push-up, 100%, right? There's almost no difference.
Yeah.
Max strict handstand push-ups or max strict press or max strict press at
Yeah.
80% body weight kind of thing.
Put that in there, even though it's starting to blur the lines a little bit. But yeah, that all goes in there.
You ever looking at things like reactive strength? Like, would you ever have somebody do like a max broad jump or like a triple jump or like a single leg bound, right, left, compare those types of things?
Yeah, potentially. Maybe not as much for a CrossFitter, but yeah, if you have the equipment, measuring some forces and things, or for a field sport athlete or a court athlete, you could get a max height broad or max height vert jump or a max broad jump. Those would be easy things to measure and helpful to track.
Yeah. You've got to use those as investigations into maybe like the Olympic lifting.
Yeah.
Right. You've got somebody who's only, they've got like 500-pound back squat. Their best clean is 300 pounds. You're like, well, maybe you're just too slow.
Yeah. So you maybe just check their broad jump. And if that's like not so good, it's, yeah, then you could start to, without necessarily, you could get some more data, right? It's like, you could start to put some pieces together. The more data you have. Yeah. Yeah. Those ones, but yeah, force plate data is pretty cool. And
it'd be cool if we could put people on force plates easily.
Yeah. I think that's probably a little bit more helpful for rehab. I don't know how much extra benefit that would give you compared to just checking like jump height and max lift.
Oh,
yeah, more information, but it's like, how much different is your programming going to be if you, to a healthy person, add the number from a force plate to those other metrics?
Oh yeah. If you're really working at an elite level, like you've got somebody who's been doing CrossFit for 10, 12, 15 years, and their max lifts haven't moved in 5, you might have to do notes.
Yeah.
What about gross range of motion?
Yeah. So yeah, like movement patterns for sure.
I was thinking more joint specific. Like, do you have 180 degrees of shoulder flexion?
Hmm.
Do you have 120 degrees of hip flexion?
Yeah. Yeah. I
That
would.
might be like stage 2.
Yeah. If somebody coming into the clinic, yeah, we're probably starting there. But if we're starting in the gym and they can press a barbell overhead, well, then we already know they have specific joint range of motion for that, right?
Yeah.
So we don't need to necessarily break it down. But yeah, if we're starting very regressed and we don't know really what they can do, then start there.
This is basically like, we're at the stage of athlete intake, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty comprehensive list.
Yeah. That's solid.
Strength numbers, endurance numbers, just kind of like general observations around movement. If needed, some force and speed specifics. And then again, if needed, those like gross or local range of motion.
Yeah. And those can be broken down further too, right? You can break those out into their component motions and you can go even passive to distinguish between, control and actual tissue restriction.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Let's start at the top of the list. You have somebody come in, you recognize that they need, um, they're behind on their max lifts, like they're understrong. Then what are the progressions that you go through? Or what does the thinking tree look like?
So they're not strong enough for their desired outcome. So then we should prioritize that in training, right?
So that's a key distinction to desired outcome, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is the goal of this person? I want to qualify for quarterfinals. I want to qualify for semifinals. And you should have some benchmarks in place for that, right? Like men, women, back squat, overhead press, push press, deadlift. You could use those like Poliquin strength ratios. How do you feel about those?
Poliquin was one of those guys that I kind of, after enough goofy recommendations, I stopped listening and reading his material.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I remember he had all kinds of stuff, and there was probably a lot of gems, but I just saw one too many dumb fucking recommendations.
Yeah. I think it's a novel idea in terms of like giving you some guidance,
Sure.
right?
What were they?
Or to know them off. I've got them saved somewhere, but it's like everything's based off of a percentage of your back squat.
So just ratios of the different lifts stick to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are definitely helpful. Definitely see those a lot for people talking about Olympic weightlifting.
But then you kind of have to think like specific to your sport, right?
Yeah.
So reference lift back squat, true depth. So whatever that means. Front squat, 85%, clean deadlift, 100%, snatch deadlift, 90%, powerlifting deadlift, 120%. But then you go to CrossFit, and do you think it would be more or less valuable to have a front squat that is a higher percentage of your back squat?
Way more valuable.
Way more valuable, like that style of squat. And then, you're like, okay, what kind of back squat? Is this a high bar back squat or is it a low bar back squat? Where's my stance, my torso angle? I would almost, if I were working up with a CrossFitter, I wouldn't even consider back squat because none of the squatting that we do is specific to the back squat. It's almost 100% specific to the front squat. Overhead squat is going to be a lot more like a front squat. We do wall balls, we do thrusters. It's all front squatting. Clean deadlift versus powerlifting deadlift. Like, why? Let's just use clean
Yeah. Or just deadlift.
and make it a percentage of our front squat.
Yeah.
and then snatch, deadlift. That's where quality of testing and like consistency starts to, because you might be able to snatch, deadlift like your back squat, but that doesn't mean that you're going to snatch it.
And are you allowed to use straps? Like almost every weightlifter that does heavy snatch pulls is using straps.
Yeah.
And
And what does your back look like?
that's,
Are you in the position of a powerlifting style deadlift with a wide grip,
yeah,
or are you maintaining your back angle, keeping your chest up, lifting with your legs,
yeah,
or are you like hitching it at the hip just to get it to lock out?
yeah, yeah.
And then there's,
And a clean, like a clean pull and a snatch pull. I don't think we need those numbers in there.
you know, and then there's upper body strength balance, bench press, close grip bench press should be 90%, push press 85%, incline bench press 80%, strict press 60% of bench press, 75% of push press, weighted dip, supinated grip chin up, chest supported barbell row, preacher curl, standing reverse curl, all based off of your bench press.
Standing reverse curl based off bench is wild.
Yeah. Yeah. You could
Yeah,
definitely, like, if you're going to look at, I guess the curl, it's just so hard to standardize, but
that might as well be astrology, honestly.
yeah. Why don't you just do like max legless rope climbs in 5 minutes or 3 minutes and be like, your biceps are probably a weakness,
Yeah,
or your grip strength is probably a weakness. And then you just start training those things specifically. It's a good jumping off point, but it's better, I think, to have relative numbers for your sport and then also relative numbers for your athlete. Like if you have a long legged, short torsoed athlete, they're going to deadlift relatively more than they squat, whichever version of that squat you choose. And then, so are you just going to continue to pour gas on this back squat or this squatting pattern fire, trying to bring it up to X percentage of their back squat or of their deadlift, where you're essentially wasting time?
yeah. The percentages are like an interesting and potentially helpful metric. And then you have a lot of work to do to make it actually fit the person.
I would say a better route would be to look at the cohort of people you're competing against, get some strength numbers that are actually relevant to performance, and then use those supporting strength exercises to try to figure out where the holes are. Now we're getting into the art of figuring out how to apply science, right? So, if you've got a sufficient clean, let's say you've got a 385 clean, you want to compete at the games, you've got a 385 clean, it's good enough. We don't really care about your front squat after that. Same goes for snatch. If your snatch is good enough, it's kind of like when we were talking about, if you can press a barbell, we can assume you don't have any overhead shoulder limitations. So we don't really need to test your shoulder flexion, active and or passive. If you can clean and snatch appropriate numbers, we don't need to look at your front squat, or your overhead squat, or your snatch push press.
Yeah.
If you can jerk appropriate numbers, we don't really need to look at your strict press, push press numbers.
It would just be like unlikely to be out of whack so much that that would be the thing that like takes you out of contention, right? Like you have these high level metrics and they're all good enough. It would be really weird to then have the components or like the lower level versions of those things be like so bad that then on, some of the workouts, like you can't do, shoulder to overhead with like a lighter weight, but your
Yeah.
jerk is amazing, right? It's like, probably not going to be so bad that it doesn't work out.
Yeah. especially if we're also testing things like strict handstand push-ups.
Yeah, like those aren't the only ones. Those max lifts aren't the only metrics we have. These other things too. We just don't need literally everything necessarily.
Yeah. You can paint a pretty good picture with like 5 things, pretty much. Right? Front squat, snatch, clean and jerk, deadlift, some sort of max strict handstand push-up test, some sort of max weighted pull-up test or strict pull-up test.
Yeah.
Like literally all you need. And then if there's an issue, then you dive deeper to figure out what those issues are.
Yeah. So those are the strength metrics.
So let's summarize that. If we're taking like our primary metrics are snatch, clean and jerk, strict handstand push-ups,
Mhm.
strict pull-ups, and deadlift. That's going to tell us where we need to go deeper, right? If you identify the snatch as a weakness, where are you going first?
And what should we do if the snatch is a weakness?
If you see that the snatch is low, because we're just going to pick some low-hanging fruit. You see that the snatch is low, where do you go from there? What's your next assessment? What's the next number that you want to know?
Well, honestly, the technique would be the first thing I would look for, right? It's like we have all these strength numbers. Let's say all those other ones are sufficient. So they're strong enough. It's like, okay, we got to see what's going on with the technique here. They're not applying their strength well. Let's see why.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
I think that's the obvious one. It almost has to go without saying that when you do these movements, if it were like a client intake and you just asked for these 5 tests and then you were going to have a call with them, but you don't get to see anything. The first assumption you're going to make is like, this is probably a technical issue. As far as assessment goes, I would go after technique. I would go to overhead squat.
Yeah.
But you're kind of assessing 2 things there. Like I would want to see it. What does it look like? What is the number?
And then you could have a jump. You could have a jump in there as well.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Clean jerk is kind of 2 lifts. Where are you going without, like jumping over technique? The clean and jerk isn't good enough. Then how do things go down the tree?
Yeah, I would probably ask them which part of the lift they're missing more often. Because it could very well be that I'll use myself as an example here, though I'm not an elite athlete. I had never missed a jerk in my life until the Grizzly games last year because I could not clean as much as I could jerk.
Yeah.
So I would probably ask, where do you usually miss the lift?
Oh, like whether it's the clean or the jerk?
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of have to break them into 2 groups, right? Like it's clean and then jerk. So that's definitely the first one. We're not going to do clean and jerk. We're going to do clean. Your clean is not up to snuff. So the first question I'm asking is, what's your front squat?
Yeah.
And then I would reference also the deadlift number that I've been given. If the deadlift is enough, if this person has a 500-pound deadlift or something like that, then I want to know what their front squat is. I guess that's maybe how like your intake would go with somebody as you're talking to them and you're like, what's your best snatch? And they're like, oh, it's 80 kilos. Like, oh, what's your best overhead squat? 85 kilos. Well, you need to overhead squat. We need to bring up the overhead squat. I don't even need to see your technique. If I know that your overhead squat best is only 5 kilos more than your best match, you're going to get better at snatching just by improving your overhead squat.
Yeah.
Same with clean. What's your best deadlift? 500 pounds. What's your best clean? 250. What's your best front squat? 300. You're probably going to get better at cleans if you can bring that front squat up to like 350, 360, which you should be strong enough to do, unless we've got this like, some people are just freak deadlifters, right? For whatever reason, they just have, could be limbs, it could be a number of things, mobility, motor control, core strength, but they just can't match the front squat is just not there. So that could be a technical issue, but that's going to be covered in strength, right? Like you have to fold mobility into the discussion around strength, because mobility is, as we discussed last time, it's more about flexibility plus control. And you can be not that flexible, but still have great positions for these movements.
And just to kind of touch on that deadlift point, the crazier those powerlifting numbers get, the more those ratios go out the window, right? Because then you're getting into these kind of freaky, either specialists or the body types are getting kind of crazy. So, if you're starting to deadlift a 600-700 ish, that clean ratio is probably going to be quite a bit lower.
You're only looking at like, what do I need too?
Yeah. Yeah. Like they deadlift 600, 650. It's like, okay, good. Don't need that. Let's just focus in on the clean. What do you need to do there? Okay, you can't do it. Okay, we got to either front squat more or, work on your technique.
Yeah.
Or both.
Yeah. Technique always, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You're never going to be. Yeah.
What about the jerk?
Push press.
Yeah. This is where I would consider that press to push press ratio for sure. If you're not push pressing 20 to 30% more than your strict press, it's probably some sort of power piece, right? How you are either creating power in the lower body or how you are transferring that power through to the upper body. It could be as simple as your front rack. You've got a really stiff front rack. And then that's an easy fix. Just do some mobility work, assuming that it can be fixed. It's not like some sort of, like me can't bend my elbow beyond 90 degrees. So that front rack is never going to be there. But this is where you could start to look at ratios. Push press, strict press.
Yeah. And what would you expect, or what would you like to see the push press in relation to the strict press? You said 20 to 30. Is that kind of the minimum? Or is that what you would expect?
Yeah. And then as it starts to tip in the opposite direction, like if you're push pressing 50% more than your strict pressing, it's probably going to show you a bit of a deficit in strict overhead pressing strength. You're going to notice in the strict handstand push-ups, unless body weight is heavily in your favor, but you're probably going to notice that when you do your strict handstand push-up test.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Those two can probably give you, and then after that, technique. How do you move into the split or move into the power position?
I think even, you might look to your deadlift at some point here as well to see that upper back and the like torso can actually handle that kind of force transmission, right? If you can't maintain that front rack, that posture in the dip, you're gonna miss out front, or you're just gonna be really inconsistent, right? But that's a little bit further down the line, I guess.
Yeah. It's still part of the whole scientific process of looking further down the line, where you're like, essentially what you're looking for are gaps. Strict handstand push-up, this is more of just a metric. And you're like, we don't really, well, I would look at, if somebody were weak in the strict handstand push-up, then I would go to strict press. What's your strict press? Then immediately after that, I would start looking at things like strict toes to bar, L sit hold, some sort of core thing, because that's where most people are failing. upper back strength, the deadlift, like you were saying, do they have the upper back strength to actually support their body weight or body weight, BMI?
Yeah, that's going to be probably the like single biggest factor for this, right? There will be an amount of body weight that you cannot overcome for a strict
Yeah.
handstand push up, but within, within a kind of a roughly average range, then there's other stuff that comes in.
Yeah.
Do you do any like specific testing on for like more like core strength? Because like most of the things are going to be either pretty long holds. Like if you're testing a hollow hold, that could go on for a while, or toast bar could be quite a number of reps. Would you ever do any harder testing on that?
I think the standards are far too subjective
Yeah.
to come up with like a core test. I
Yeah.
would look into those metrics that I talked about, like L sit hold,
Yeah.
max and broken toes to bar, deadlift strength. What was the other one that I was L sit hold? Yeah, even like that movement quality piece of how easy is it for you to get your arms around.
Yeah.
Handstand
Yeah.
walk would be a good indicator. It would tell you a lot right out of the gate. Like if you have core handstand push-ups, but you can handstand walk for 100 feet unbroken, probably not a shoulder mobility limitation.
And the kind of inverse of that is like if you have to arch really, really hard to get into the position, right? It's like you're not going to be transferring that force as effectively.
Mhm.
And push up numbers probably going to suck.
And you're likely not going to be walking 100 feet unbroken.
Yeah. Yeah. That person may not be walking very far.
Yeah. If they do, their wrists are going to be sore.
Yeah.
I guess we're kind of like the snatch, the clean, and the jerk are tier one exercises, you could say, for assessment in strength. And then the handstand push-up, strict pull-up, deadlift are tier two. They tell us a lot more about what's going on. And then tier three is when you start getting into more specific things: overhead squat, jump, front squat, push press, strict press, body mass index, some sort of core endurance. I think I would have to say that LSIT, max LSIT hold would probably be your best core endurance test. It's not going to be super specific to the strict handstand push-up because your arms are in a different position, but like if you've got the strength, it's going to show up in the LSIT hold.
That one's a good one. Easy to do too, right? It's like you can get that data really easily. So why not get it? And then if you don't end up needing it, that's fine.
And very easy to standardize too.
Super easy.
Whereas if you're to do like a weighted Chinese plank or something like that,
Yes. Yes.
even like some sort of GHD hold,
Yeah.
GHD Sorensen hold, a GHD sit up hold, where's the pad? Are your legs straight?
Max out the yoke carry.
Yeah. Farmer's carry could be a decent core test, but there's so much of a great component that,
Yeah, you'd probably have to use straps for it to be a great core test.
yeah. That's another thing that I think is under thought of in CrossFit is grip strength, grip endurance. It can be a massive, massive limiter for people. And that goes from like unbroken sets of ring, bar, muscle ups, toes to bar, barbell cycling, things. Even if you like put somebody upside down on their hands and they're stuck in wrist extension and they're using those flexors to control their balance, if they haven't got the endurance there, it can be a nightmare.
Yeah, for sure. That's a big one that can easily go unrecognized, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah. You just look at, you're like, how come your ring muscle ups are not where they need to be? And you're doing like, just these sets of ring muscle ups or sets of dips. But then you dig a little deeper and you realize like, oh, this person just can't hang on to the rings well enough to keep going, to keep transferring power from their core through their shoulders into the rings.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of an issue it is nowadays with modern grips.
Definitely a lot of variability with different grips and even different bars, right? If you're, the one that we have in the gym in the middle red and black rig, if unless you have frog grips and the bar is completely clean, that shit is so slippery. And I literally can't use any other grips because I'll just slip off. I have to go bare hand with a little bit of chalk. It has to be just right. It's so slippery.
Yeah. That's frustrating from a coach's perspective too. Our bars are set up where it's like, we have these kind of bars for like, if you're 5'10" to 6'2", super grippy, and it's really easy to jump up. And all of our lower bars are super slippery. So almost across the board, women struggle to learn things like toes to bar. And it's only because they're stuck on this bar, the proper height for them, but it's the wrong grip. So they're struggling. And I can't count the number of times that I've been like, you need to move to this bar, like step off a bench, use this bar. They hop up, they do a set. They're like, wow, that was incredible. I had a PR. I did 7 toes to bar, and I've never even done one before. Like, it's great, right? Imagine like trying to run on ice versus run on turf versus run on a track surface.
Yeah.
You need that grip friction to be able to kip hard.
Yeah. We could have a max Captains of Crush gripper in our list.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the like micro community of closing Captains of Crush?
I've just very briefly, because I bought a few myself, and I quite like that. It's such a just like fun little thing to work on. Wardo and I briefly got into, he more than I got into bending in
Yeah, I remember he came up one time with some like nails and some bolts and stuff like that. He's like, I'm getting into bending. He's like, what are you talking? He's like, I've been bending nails.
What happened to you, man?
Yeah, why? Why are you doing this? And then a couple months later, he came back up and he was like, yeah, I'm not bending anymore. I like damaged some nerve in my hand. Like, well, it's probably a good idea. It's not a lot of payoff. If you follow Iron Mind on Facebook, they'll post, like every couple of months, you'll see a post come up and it'll be like, congratulations to this guy from this state for successfully closing the number 3 Captains of Brush. And there's like 5 people who've ever done it. It's as niche gets.
Like grip training, bending, nails, and like, even arm wrestling's like way more popular than that now because it's got like a whole league and stuff. But I can't remember if I bought the number 3, but I have the number 1 and the number 2, and I've closed the number 2 like twice, but only with my right hand.
Yeah.
It's so hard, man. And the number 3 is like a pipe dream.
Impossible.
But there is a 4.
Yeah.
That's the one that, almost nobody has done.
And they go up in 0.5s.
Yeah.
It's funny that there's only like 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2. And you get to 3, and it's like 5% of the population can do it. 3.5, 1% of the population. 4, 0.01% of the population can do it. Pretty big jumps.
They are big jumps. Yeah.
What are your endurance metrics?
Probably put the 2K row in there. 1 mile run or 1K run. And then maybe some sort of repeated bout, maybe some shorter sprints. That's starting to get into more just like pure power though, and speed. So, maybe a shorter sprint, like a 100 or 200 meter sprint. And then, yeah, like probably like a 50 cal echo bike for time. I think those are probably the most. I mean, you could have some longer endurance stuff. You could have a 5K run, but I think though, like these shorter ones are probably a little bit more useful, right?
And you've got a good like variety in there that can kind of tell you a lot about, because essentially you're almost looking at them as individual skills, right? Like you need to have the ability and the skills to row this way. It's as much about skill as it is about fitness to a point.
Yeah.
I like to do critical power testing
Yeah.
for most of them.
And do you do that over 30 minutes or an hour?
I just do 3 individual tests.
Yeah.
So depending upon the modality, for row, I'll do 500, 2K, 5K.
Yeah.
And that'll give me a nice critical power curve. Lets me know where their critical power is. And then I can use that I like using that to write in conditioning pieces.
Yeah.
If we're doing like row repeats or even mixed model stuff, I'll be like, you need to row at this specific pace. That's a good kind of software side of things so that people can have a target. They're like, this pace is good for me, or this pace is too fast for me. This pace, I was actually able to recover quite well at this pace. So then they can start making decisions related to their performance. So that would be row. I would do 500, 2K, 5K. Run,
Yeah.
I usually do 400. That's going to tell me enough about their top end speed. And it's
Yeah.
like around a minute to 2 minutes for most people. And then a mile. I choose the mile just because it's more relevant. I think there's a lot more mile times out there. And then the
Yeah.
3K.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do 3 minute run, 6 minute run, 12 minute run for meters. And I do find that distances are better for time trial efforts because you have that finish line in sight. So people will push closer to their max.
Yeah. It is easier to cross the finish line than a time, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. And
Yeah.
then air bike, I always do 50 cal per time. That gives you a really good idea. That's like probably the most transferable test, I think, because there's very little technique. So it tells you a lot about somebody's peak power output. Like you might not get as good of a picture of that in 500-meter row, which they'll be close to the same time. Like if you're really good at 50 cal air bike, like I'm talking really, really good, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But if you're very good, then 50 seconds. If you're, like pretty good, very good, that's where the very is not in all caps, like a minute, minute 10, 500-meter row, very good, 120. Like if you're a semifinals level athlete, I would expect to see 120 or at least close 120, 121 for a 500-meter row. But if you've got poor technique, you're just not going to be able to do that. With the air bite, there's nowhere to not show off your capacity. And then I would do a 3 minute and a 12 minute too, or a 6 minute and a 12 minute.
Okay.
With record average watts.
And with the air bike, I think maybe slightly more than the row, you maybe get like a little bit of that grittiness too. Like I don't know, maybe other people don't feel the same way, but I find it a lot easier to push on a row than on a bike. It just is less locally demanding on one particular part of your body.
Yes, I know what you mean.
It's,
Yeah, like that point on the rower, your hamstrings or your biceps are just in so much pain. The air bike is all breathing and like global leg fatigue.
yeah. And then so you have 3 for each of those, and then you get a curve. And if the curve is like very flat, you'd probably give them more high intensity, really high intensity intervals. And if the curve was super, super steep, you'd probably give them a little bit more on the longer side.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Steep. You need to make this person more enduring. We talked about this when it came to running. Was like, think of it simply, right? If you want to go faster, train faster. If you want to go longer, train to go longer. So if you've got that really steep curve, then this person needs more work around endurance. They need to improve their efficiency. which is what we talked about, the caloric cost of exercise. They need to increase their mitochondria. They need to improve like cardiovascular endurance, all of those pieces. They need volume essentially. And if they are a shallow curve, then they need to improve their power output.
Yeah.
And whereas you take that is the art side of things. Right. So then you go back to our 1RMs, our rep max testing. And you're like, okay, so we see that you are an enduring athlete on the rower and you are deadlifting only 1.25 times your body weight. If we increase your deadlift, your row power is going to go up. We don't even need to row. We can do a little bit of rowing, but it's not a priority. We'll just do some for technique. And we're going to work on your deadlift. And that row is going to go way, way higher than if you were to do like, and it's safer too, but if you were to do, like 10-second all out efforts on the rower, I think you're going to get more bang for your buck.
Yeah.
That's kind of like an art side of this assessment piece.
Yeah, for sure. Like if they don't have enough strength, there is no way for them to produce enough power to go faster. So get them heavy deadlifts and maybe some heavy pulling accessories, weighted chin ups or barbell rows or something.
Yeah. That's, I think, the easiest way to assess endurance metrics. And then you would want to have mixed modal stuff in there, I think.
Some benchmark times.
Yeah. You're just kind of in this stage of just painting a picture of what this person needs.
Yeah.
That pretty much covers all of the hardware / science side of coaching, right? Like you're either strong enough or not strong enough to do the sport, and you're either fit enough or not fit enough to do the sport. And the only thing it doesn't take into consideration are skills.
Yeah.
You want how they move, how they do things. And that could be skills in the Olympic lifts, skills in the gymnastics movements, skills in running or rowing or ski erg or whatever.
And if they're not strong enough, the science tells us how to get them stronger. Or if their endurance is not good enough, the science tells us how to get them more enduring. And then the artist trying to find the way that best suits the person to do those things, right? How do we get them to do it?
Yeah.
Without them dying.
Yeah, we're actually getting them to do it, right? Like sometimes we swing that pendulum too far on the other and we're too conservative. We're like, oh, it's always good to start conservatively, but I think we can be like, this was like early in my learning development, the phrase do no harm was repeated over and over and over again. And I think it put some fear into coaches where I was like, I cannot hurt this person. I have to be so careful about what I prescribe that I don't give them too much. And then you get these, like, you're just doing things, but you're not getting any adaptation.
The Hippocratic Oath.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't really, I mean, it's a great soundbite, but yeah, like there's always risk, right? You got to just take appropriate risks, not put the athlete in harm's way intentionally or in like with a high probability of harm. And again, that's like probably mostly art at that point.
Let's run with that. How strength, the first like progression that I'll put somebody on strength wise is some sort of auto regulating progression, like a 5-3-1. It's just so easy and you can monitor progress. So you can see if they're adapting week after week after week after week. For those who don't know, this would be like 5-3-1. You do in week 1, 5 reps, 5 plus reps at a given percent. Week 2, 3 reps, 3 plus reps at a given percent. Week 3 on 531, it's 5 reps, 2 reps, 1 plus reps at 10%. And if they're like blowing through those rep maxes every time, then you know that they're adapting. You recycle, go back to 555, 333, 531. Or in my case, I like to use 864 or something like that, 642. And you see that they're just continually getting more reps, or they're matching the reps. You come back, bump the weights up, run it through. They hit the same reps or more reps again, run it back, bump the weights up. They're continuing to get more and more weight. You're just like, well, this is easy. It's such a very obvious picture of, are they adapting to the training or not? And then on the flip side, if they're not, then you pivot.
Yeah, that program is funny. It's like a great place to start, but those percentages when you start are so low that the 5+ is 20 the first cycle, and the 3+ is like 16. But yeah, no, like that, I think that range is a great place. Like that 5, maybe 5 to 10 for like a more beginner person, so they get a good bit more practice, more repetition. And then, if the person's like maybe a little bit more intermediate, yeah, just sticking around the 5s, and either, just like a linear progression on 5s for a while, or like a bit of an auto-regulated, like 4 to 6 reps at a given effort level, and add weight as possible.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Another thing that I'll do on the art side of that is if I'm seeing that adaptation is stalling, I will change the order of things. So let's say, like somebody, they're starting off and I determine that the overhead squat is something they need to work on. So we go overhead squat, snatch, and everything is intended to progress quite linearly. And then all of a sudden their snatch numbers are just kind of like stalling out. I'll just move that snatch before the overhead squat. And then that'll usually give me like another 6 to 8 weeks of ability to progress.
Yeah.
I guess that's like the art piece of knowing how to arrange things within a single training session, so that you're continually focusing and getting results towards the things that matter. Because the overhead squat doesn't matter. It's the snatch that matters. And then you kind of have to like retool, or I'll move a handstand push-up. Sometimes we'll do like handstand walks act as a warm-up for handstand push-ups. And then the handstand push-ups start to stagnate. You're like, okay, I need to move these ahead of the handstand walks, so this person's just a little bit fresher going in. Or that handstand push-up just moves to a different day at the beginning of the session.
Do you want to save, maybe just do like the next episode fully on the art side? Do you have to go?
I've got like maybe 10 more minutes, and then I do have to go.
I think the toughest part of this side of things is just the like motivation and communication part, right? It's like, especially in a rehab context, it's tough to either get them to do what they need to do, or like communicate the kind of like underlying principles without them going into a coma, right? It's like nobody wants to hear about science.
Yeah.
They don't want to be told. On this side, it's like more about getting people to do more. In the gym, it's going to be more trying to get people to do less. And that, I think that part is interesting, but definitely more challenging than the things that we've talked about so far. Those are just like kind of straightforward.
Are you kind of referring to like minimum effective dose? Like getting people to realize that they are moving in the right direction and they don't need to do that extra set of these things. You're like, look, man, you like 6 weeks ago, you could only do 30 handstand push-ups in the session. Now we're 50. Why
That's
are
definitely,
you doing extra stuff?
yeah, that's one thing for sure. And again, it's like, if you're in the gym, you're working with athletes, you're going to have a different challenge than when you're in the clinic and you're working with a layperson. It completely opposite challenge.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Most of the people that come to see me are doing no exercise.
Yeah.
I have to try to help them do anything at all. And just telling them that they need to do it, not good enough. So there's that whole part of this, which is that kind of motivational coaching piece, which is
Yeah.
tough. But then it's just the flip side for an athlete, right? It's like you said, they've made crazy progress, but they don't recognize it, or they just always want to keep doing more and more, and they just will keep doing more until they have a problem.
Yeah.
You got to
And then things stagnate. Right? And you're like, well, that's because you're doing too much. You're not recovering.
yeah,
And that kind of gets into that high-low discussion around training. You just had a big upper body session yesterday, and then you decided that you wanted to test your 50 strict handstand push-ups for time today. Of course, you didn't have a good score. It wasn't in your program that way because we know that you wouldn't have had a good score.
yeah.
I feel like we've kind of covered the science side of coaching. Maybe we should just leave art for next episode.
We can, more programming setups and more, scenarios and stuff that might be interesting to go into with, now that we have those metrics in place, how do we use them? What are the different types of people that we've run into? How do they respond? How should we, coach them?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Do that next time. And then high-low, I think, could be on its own almost, or it could fit in with that partly, and then also partly with like periodization, I think too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think
It
those,
essentially is periodization, right? Like it's microcycle periodization.
yeah, exactly. Microcycle design.
Yeah, we could definitely just do an episode. We could keep like introducing the idea of high-low and then be like, okay, this is what periodization is. It's a microcycle. It's a mesocycle. It's a macrocycle. And this is how high-low fits into it. Cool. Okay, I got to bounce. I got to go get my youngster.
Okay.
Okay,
All right,
see you, man.
have a good weekend.
You too.
Cheers.